Hello, everybody, and welcome. I don't know what that was. Welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. I am your host, William Fletcher, and I'm back. I have not recorded in about a month or so. I think, it would have been about a month or so since I recorded. Probably over a month since I recorded, because I recorded the Martin McDonagh episode. Actually, no, I recorded my what I watched this month at the beginning of November. It's been a while though. It's been nearly a month. So yeah, I'm back to continue doing this. So this I'll be discussing the films, the filmography of Edgar Wright, ranked not Last Night in Soho, as I have not seen that, but I feel like it kind of coincides nicely with that. So that's what this week is, and then for the next few weeks, throughout December, I'll have like the regular type of episodes, and at the end of the year, the last episode of the year, I am planning on the 27th is the last Monday of the year, so I'm planning to record and release a review of the year episode on the 27th of December, and that will lead nicely into the first of the next year of January, where that will go back to normal, and that's sort of going to be my plan for the rest of the year's a end of year review of the year, where like the final Monday of every year will just be a review of the year, talking about film. So my sort of, I guess, what we talk for review of the year will just be like, it'll just be me and a few other guests. We'll just talk about, so the best films we saw, some of the worst films too, maybe some good television, some good video games we may have played, So that'll be the final episode of the year. But that is in like 4 weeks' time. And so this week I'll be discussing the films of Edgar Wright ranked. So I was not able to rewatch the films that I'd already seen prior to this. I just watched the two new ones, but I have seen his other films multiple times, so I feel like my ranking is pretty much where it's at. And there is no Lost in Soho, as I've not been able to see that yet. I will probably cover that when I eventually watch it in one of my what I watched this month. Probably it'll be the first one next year. So yes. So starting off at the bottom of the list, to no one's surprise, A Fistful of Fingers. If you haven't seen it, it's his first film technically. It's more or less a student film. It's like fine. It is a student film. It's one of the two I hadn't seen prior to this, but I mean, prior to this, I'd seen all like his, I don't want to say proper film, but like the ones that like everyone knows. For context, I hadn't seen A Fistful of Fingers or the Sparks Brothers doc that he released this year. But A Fistful of Fingers was fine. There are some good bits, some good jokes in it, but it mostly just kind of feels like it doesn't really feel like a film. There's some variably like problematic and kind of outdated jokes involving Native Americans. So I mean, of course, that could just be the joke that it's pointing out the how problematic and idiotic Americans can be when portraying Native Americans, but it just felt a bit off to me. And like it's fine. Like I probably will never watch it again unless I do a full retrospective and watch through of all his films, which is entirely possible because I should have said this at the beginning. Edgar Wright is probably my top 3, possibly, directors ever, because he's just so good. He's just a great filmmaker. But Fistful of Fingers is by far his weakest film, and I will say this: I don't think he's made a bad film. Even Fistful of Fingers is like fine. Then at number 6, we've got the Sparks Brothers doc. I watched that. I finished that like 20-30 minutes ago before I started recording this. I don't really have much to say. I'm not really familiar with the Sparks Brothers. I didn't really care about it. I was kind of at a point like, okay, just get on with it. I don't really care that much about it because it's a band. But like it's a decent documentary. It goes on for way too long. It's like 2 hours 20 minutes. It's like that's too long. If a film's gonna go that long, you should justify it going that long, and it doesn't really justify that, if I'm being completely honest. So I'm not saying too much about these two films. I don't really have much to say about these films because they're kind of just whatever. They're fine. But now we get into pretty much every film here on I either really like or love. So, next is Baby Driver, where I feel like that's a bit of a hot take because I know a lot of people really, really love Baby Driver. I mean, I really liked Baby Driver too. I think Baby Driver is a really good film. I had it much higher. I think I had it at one point. I probably would have had it as like a 10. But the more I think about it, and I have watched it subsequently since my initial viewing, I kind of feel that it's not that good. It's kind of like, well, not as not. I should have rephrased that. Less good than I remember it being, because I definitely think it's a good film. And hell, I'd say it's a pretty good film, and I stand by it. It is a great film. There's just so much. The opening, like, one take they have of Ansel Elgort's character going to, like, the coffee shop is great. I think that's a really good bit. I think that's probably one of my favorite, just, like, singular shots in a film. And I mean, that's the thing Edgar Wright does so well, is sort of combining these very long, impressive one takes that are amazing. I think the music stuff in it works decently well. I don't think any of the song choices are particularly bad, and I think it's probably one of the best. I think it's probably my top 10 of 2017, because it is a really, really good film. It is a bit problematic if he does do a sequel, considering the whole Ansel Elgort situation, which I'm not going to go into now, but I feel like some of you probably already know. I'm not going to talk about that because that's not a particularly nice situation. But, and I would like him to do a sequel because, I mean, I do think it is a fantastic film, and a sequel would be appreciated. Maybe that will be his next project, possibly. So then next up, we've got The World's End, my least favorite of the Cornetto trilogy, and I don't really think that's too surprising. I think most people are willing to admit it's probably the weakest film. However, it's still a really, really great film. Because it is. It's Edgar Wright, it's Simon Pegg writing, which is, like, that already is a pairing that works really well with Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, which we'll get onto in a minute. I think The World's End, I think it's got the best Simon Pegg character that he plays in the Cornetto trilogy. I think Gary King is one of the most, like, interesting, depressing characters that, like, the show has ever. The show? Why did I say the show? That's not a show. It's 3 movies. It's probably if we're talking overall, probably the best Edgar Wright performance. I'd honestly say it's probably the best Edgar Wright performance ever. Certainly the best of the Cornetto trilogy. And, like, he is really good in Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, to be fair. I will give him that. He is really great in those. But he's just much better in The World's End. I think the supporting cast around him is I'm talking about this one a lot more than Baby Driver. I guess because, like, there's a lot of stuff that I could just say about one of these films and it applies to all of them. Like, that's what the thing is, really. Is I could say, like, this about every film and it still works. So it doesn't really yeah, because it's that kind of thing of like, well, one thing I say about this film is applicable to every other film that he has done, because that's the thing, that Edgar Wright excels at is, the whole thing of like, you know, just sort of getting a good cast together and they all work really well. They all bounce off each other really well because they're just good. They're just good actors, really. That's what the thing is. They're just good actors. And yeah, it's a really good film. I think, to be fair, if I was to sort of put it in comparison to all the other Cornetto, the films of the Cornetto trilogy. Sorry, hi. I'm a bit tired while I'm recording this. If I was to put it in comparison, it's definitely the weakest. I feels like sort of getting the Cornetto in there feels a bit like the others. The others, they kind of a lot more sort of clever with it. I guess they're sort of a lot more. Well, I don't know if clever is the right word, but they definitely incorporate it better, because I just think that's sort of a thing that it's sort of, yeah, that they incorporate like that kind of stuff a lot better, and I think that's the very big positive of it is that they're able to, incorporate this stuff as well as they, can, as well as they do. And I think that's something this show, why do I keep saying this show? Oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's something that they're able to incorporate super well. But the World's End is the weakest. Still a really good film though, and to be fair, I know someone who has this as the best one. They're fully wrong. A former guest on the show that I've done a few episodes with at this point. But they're wrong. The World's End is not the best one. I think it is definitely the weakest. I kind of think the whole spoilers, the whole stuff with the alien invasion story is kind of like, well, it doesn't feel as natural, or doesn't like fit in as well. Like Shaun of the Dead, the whole zombies thing, like, doesn't feel shoehorned in or sort of unearned. But the whole alien thing, like the whole stuff, like the stuff in this film in The World's End feels a lot more clunky and sort of like it's trying to get to the point, when in reality it's much weaker in comparison. Not that it's bad, it's very good, but it's very much, it's still a very, very good film. Now moving on to top three. I say top three like there's a ton of films. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. This was like the last. I watched this of like the films everyone talks about. The most recently, I watched it for the first time last year. It would have been like September, like late September, I think it was last year. And I remember I watched it, and then like about a week later, I watched it again because it's just so good. And that's also and that's also a time when I rewatched Baby Driver, because I hadn't seen Baby Driver in a while. And Baby Driver is great. But Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is one of Edgar Wright's best films. He's only made like 7. But it is really good. It's a lot of fun. It's got a massive ensemble cast that Edgar Wright doesn't usually have. Like, he doesn't. Like, I think that it has like the biggest cast in regards to like named actors, like big deal actors. Like, a lot of the cast members of like Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz, I'm just like, I know like a couple. I know like the main characters, like the actors, but I don't know a lot of the supporting players. And then in Scott Pilgrim, I'm like, man, there's so many people like Anna Kendrick, Aubrey Plaza, Chris Evans, Jason Schwartzman, Brandon Routh, Brie Larson. You know, all these people, and then they're only in it for like 10 minutes. It's super weird. Like, yeah, I think it's great. I think it's visually, if I was sort of talking about in sort of a visual way, probably the best looking in that sort of respect of like it's a visually very nice looking film. It's probably got my favorite. Yeah. The sound design, the is phenomenal. The sort of whole comic book slash video game sort of aspect to it is really nice, but I do kind of, it is kind of disappointing when there's like a character and I'm like, oh, I love that character, and then they're just not in it anymore. And it's like, well, that's disappointing, isn't it? It's like, you put this character in here, but now they're gone. I don't really like that. I would argue that's in fact that's like, it can at a time sort of be like, well, you know, like, I don't know, it's just sort of, it's disappointing, I guess, if you're like, oh my god, it's this character I like, and then they're gone, and then you're just like, well, that's that. They've left. It's disappointing, but you know, it works. Michael Cera. I'm a big fan of Michael Cera. We've discussed Michael Cera a lot more in depth in like the second episode. Second episode I did on a super bad. Yeah, that's the second episode I ever did on this, and we discussed Michael Cera a lot more thoroughly there. Probably because he's Michael Cera, and he's amazing, and he's he's the main character of this, but I don't know, I kind of feel like he's a bit whatever in his performance. I think he's kind of like that in most things. I think the only I think he's pretty funny in Superbad. I like him in Molly's Game. I think he's quite good in that. He's very unlikable, and I think he's hysterical in Arrested Development. But this, it's just like, you know, he just sort of does the Michael Cera thing that he does in all the films. Because, yeah, he's Michael Cera, that's what he plays to. But, you know, he's not bad. I wouldn't say he's bad. He's just, you know, it's just the Michael Cera thing. And I kind of like when he's doing something else. Number 2 on my list. Now, these two films, you know what the top 2 films are. They're Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Both 10 out of 10, 2 of my all-time favorites. Hot Fuzz in my top 10 of all time, and Shaun of the Dead in like my top 15 of all time. I absolutely adore these films. They are super, just incredibly outstanding. So I should let you know that I do love both of these films, and so you can't get upset when I, you know, put it in the order you don't want me to. When I put it in an order that you don't agree with. Because I do love these films. They're great. Number 2 is Shaun of the Dead. Yes. Shaun of the Dead is number 2. It is not my favorite Edgar Wright film. I feel like for some people that's very much like a hot take, and a bit like controversial, like, ooh, you didn't say Shaun of the Dead is the best one. But I don't think it is. I don't massively really care for the zombie sort of parodies. I'm not a big zombie person. I don't. Not that I dislike zombie. Okay, I should like sort of explain this. I don't dislike zombies necessarily. I just am not like enamored with zombies like everyone else is. Like earlier this year, I watched Night of the Living Dead. Well, I watched the George A. Romero's of the Dead trilogy, which is Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. I didn't really care for Night of the Living Dead. I thought it was like a decent film. Dawn of the Dead, I thought was fucking great, like really, really cool and like actually scary. And then and then Day of the Dead, I was like, was my personal favorite of the three, but I should watch them again because I do like them. They're not bad films. I do like them, but Day of the Dead I think just has the best character stuff in it. But so the zombie parodies don't necessarily work for me as well as the. I might as well talk about them sort of together. The zombie parodies and sort of homages don't hit as well and don't work as well for me because I'm not that big into zombies. I don't dislike zombies. I think zombies are pretty decent sometimes, I think. But it just sort of feels like it sort of feels like, okay, this is just kind of, I think it's the best zombie film. If we want to sort of go sort of by that margin, it is indeed, it is the best of the zombie films. Because it just is, isn't it? Like, I sort of stand by my opinion that it is the best zombie film. Because it just, like, I kind of, I think it's the best zombie film because I feel like it does zombies in a way that I like. Like the whole thing of zombie, like sort of my big problem with zombies is there's sort of like a specific way I like zombies to be done. And if they're not done like sort of how I sort of think they should, like they should be doing them, I kind of just am like, well, I don't really care that much. Because it's very much like, I just think that I don't really like zombie films where the zombies are running. It kind of just feels to me like you're just doing that, aren't you? Because, it creates the tension, and I think it's actually kind of scarier when zombies aren't doing that, when zombies are, running, like they are in things like Train to Busan, or in #Alive, or like sort of the Korean zombie films, or, other zombie films. I don't think zombies should be running, so I think Shaun of the Dead has the best sort of interpretation of zombies, in my opinion. Although, actually, I will say Dawn of the Dead zombies are also pretty great, too. But I just prefer the reason I prefer Hot Fuzz amongst multiple things is I prefer the action sort of parodies and homages it does because I'm more into that kind of stuff and I'm more familiar with that stuff than I am with zombies. I just think zombies are very much like, I don't even think zombies, like, it sort of depends on the zombies, of course. I think zombies can be scary at times. I think there are times where a zombie is like legitimately scary. But it's not as often as like it should be. Like, I don't, like, a lot of the time I'm sort of like, this should be scary, but it's not. It's like Night of the Living Dead isn't scary, but like Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, I will say, are actually like scary films. Like, I will give those two films credit in being actually scary. Hell, I think the Simpsons Halloween special they do with the zombies is scarier than a lot of zombie stuff. I also prefer the characters in I think I probably prefer. Probably think Nicholas Angel is probably the weakest Simon Pegg protagonist character. I think that's probably like sort of my sort of opinion on the whole thing is Sean is the weakest one of the main characters in these films. Like, not that he's bad or anything. In fact, I would say he's probably pretty decent. I think like Nicholas Angel is like still a good character. Hell, I'd say he's a pretty decent character, but it's very much like, okay, but you know, I just think the sort of character stuff they want to do with him just doesn't work as well for me as it does with some other people. That's just sort of my opinion on it. Is that he's not a bad character, but he is like for sure the weakest character. But that being said, I prefer the supporting characters around. Oh, sorry, just kicked something there. I prefer the characters surrounding Nicholas Angel than I do the characters surrounding Sean. I think that I personally think that what's his name? I think the Andes in the Andes. Yeah, the two Andes in Hot Fuzz are some of the best characters Edgar Wright has ever written. I think they are really, really funny and very entertaining characters, and they just some of the funniest characters that he's written. You know, with Paddy Considine and Rafe Spall, I think it is. I think Timothy Dalton is a great character. His performance is phenomenal, and I personally believe that, like, in my personal opinion, I think the big twist in Hot Fuzz works remarkably well. Like, I saw a video sort of talking about like stuff you didn't know about Hot Fuzz, and I sort of spoiled that twist, but I kind of forgot that and kind of pushed it out of my mind, and I didn't really think anything of it. So, you know, when you know, something does happen, the big reveal happens, it's very much like, oh shit, you know. And the third act, the final like massive action sequence, that like the massive finale, you know, third act action sequence, it just, you know, takes everything that's been set up prior and just sort of, it's like, you know, all the things we talked about being stupid and dumb and not happening in real life, now we're gonna do them all, you know. Like jumping in the air while shooting guns and shooting it out of a car and like a big high speed chase, you know, riding on a horse into a city town, you know. They are two phenomenal films, and I'd absolutely love to cover them on the podcast at some point and do like a proper, maybe a couple episodes worth, maybe 2 episodes worth, going through Edgar Wright's directorial filmography. So I'm just going to give you the full ranking again, from worst to best. So, at the bottom at number 7, we've got Fistful of Fingers. Then The Sparks Brothers, Baby Driver, The World's End, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Shaun of the Dead, and Hot Fuzz. That is my full ranking for Edgar Wright's filmography, not including Last Night in Soho, which I have unfortunately not been able to see yet, which is a massive shame because it was in my top 10. It's one of my most anticipated films of the year, but I will talk about it, and when I eventually see it and I cover it on what I watched this month, I'll tell you where it slots into my Edgar Wright ranking. So that's all for this week's episode. I thank you all for listening. Sorry for taking the break off, but, you know, I've just finished high school, and, you know, I think I could have deserved a couple weeks off, in my personal opinion. I'm hopefully for now, for like the rest, for however much longer I run this podcast, I will try my best to get an episode out every week to you. And on Wednesday, I'll be talking about the films that I watched this past month. On Wednesday, it will be. So look out for that, because that is going to be hopefully very good. And then in the next few weeks, I've got some episodes planned with some people, and maybe some new people will be coming on the show at some point. Exciting. So, yes, that is all. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.